Assalamu alaikum.
God, I'm being really loud.
Yeah, how many hats do you have, do you reckon?
7, probably.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah, probably
Oh,
7.
mashallah, it seems like you got more than that, just the way you
I
switch
mean,
it up on us.
I've had them for like years.
That's how it should be, bro, till they fall apart.
Absolutely.
No, I've got like 4 hats. So,
You weren't much of a hat guy until you met me, I think.
yeah, but
Just say it.
I've
Just
known
say
you
it.
for so long. I mean, you could take that one. Bro,
take
look
it.
at this mustache, bro. It's crazy, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Arafah, bro. It's Arafah day. We're recording. I feel like
It
it's been a
is.
while, but it's been like 2 weeks since we recorded together. How's your Arafah going? I'm guessing you're
Well,
fasting, are you?
imagine if I wasn't fasting, then you would have really shamed me in front of the entire audience.
I mean, look, people have reasons, man.
I mean, I am fasting,
Yeah.
alhamdulillah. But I'm not going to ask you if you're fasting or not, because I'm going to play the better man.
Yeah. But obviously, I wouldn't ask if I wasn't fasting, right?
You never know. You could be like,
Otherwise,
you
it'll be a
fasting?
trap.
Be like, you fasting? I'm not.
Yeah.
That's where the conversation could go.
Yes, that's possible. That's a different type of podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So
Did you
how
listen
is
to
your
the last
fast?
episode?
Because your Maghrib is proper late there now, man, right?
Yeah, it's going to be at 9:15.
9:15, okay. For us, it's 9:45, so it's like half-hour different.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
It's been all right today. I mean, I've been busy working in and out of the house. So,
Yeah.
God, I left the house like 4 times, I think. I know that doesn't sound. I mean, like I went out for a while, then had to come back and then go out again.
In and
come
out
back.
4 times.
Yeah. So it's been all right though. Alhamdulillah. It's hot though. It's quite warm. I've definitely got like a hat tan. Look at that.
Yes.
Hat tan.
Yes. Yeah, I did listen to the last episode. I might have 10 minutes left, something like that.
Pakistan's in the bad.
Yeah, bro. Actually, I want to share that with my partner Mohammed and see what he thinks, because he's quite, linked to Pakistan. He lived there actually quite a few years, and he goes there semi-regularly. But yeah, it was interesting, definitely. But I think that's what I would assume. Like, okay, what did he say about Pakistan? He was saying like, kind of, how do you say it? Comfort-wise or infrastructure-wise, it's not the best once you like leave like some sort of community compound thing, right?
Yeah.
That was one thing he said. But again, like I would expect that, right? Like electricity going now and then, this and that. So I kind of had the idea that it's like that, at least in certain areas. And then he was saying the thing I remembered as well was about. There's a lot of, some people are like ignorant of Islam, and you have like all different kind of versions of Islam being practiced, which is problematic. Anything else? What was the main? Obviously, I'm sure he said positive things as well, but I'm just.
Yeah, a lot of it is all of those sort of, I don't want to say stereotypical, but they are the things that we come to expect. Like, I expect that of Tunisia. Everything he said, I wasn't surprised, and I kind of knew or felt like I would know that. As far as like the deen element and people being ignorant of the deen, I was like, I know that exists.
Yeah.
It goes back to that debate. It was a bit of a debate, I think. We mostly had it on the Telegram group where I was being a bit pessimistic about the Muslim world, so to speak. And I was saying like, remember, I think the statement I made was, I wouldn't be surprised if the majority of Muslims don't even pray 5 times a day. And I think the counter was, obviously, number one, I don't know that. But then we went into like these details of like some research that we found, and actually it was a bit
the whole assuming
complex.
the worst thing and all
that. And that's kind of it. That's it. So like, after that debate we had, I kind of tried to rectify that in myself and not assume the worst. But then when we did the podcast with Brother Swallowfee, I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting the podcast to be about all the negatives or focus mainly on the negatives.
Yeah.
So it kind of threw me off guard a little bit. But I did play devil's advocate, so to speak, in trying to, sway the conversation into the more positive light. However, ultimately, what I want to say is all the stuff he said, they're not things that I'm so surprised about. However, if you were to make hijrah, I feel like you need to realize what you're getting yourself into, and actually, how much of this luxury life that you live here do you really need and want to take with you? Because I think that's the question you have to ask yourself. And I always think back to those 2 months I spent in Tunisia. That was, I think, the longest in recent years I've spent there, where I spent 2 months, and I learned to just accept it in a way. And that was like, as long as I had internet, that's it. That's all I really cared about. But there were other things like transport and stuff like that. Like, I don't have a car there. But for me, it's not the end of the world traveling on my own. But with your family, it's very difficult to always be chasing taxis and stuff like that. And people are people. But as long as you've got, people can be people here as well. It's just, what do you think, bro? Let me ask what you think. I was in the podcast, you weren't. What do you think from what he said?
I think like a lot of the things he mentioned, maybe they weren't top of mind for me, but I was aware of them, right? In terms of the negatives, right? Okay, that's cool. I kind of expected that stuff. But for me, it's like, there's no way that makes, if we're comparing like a non-Muslim country to a Muslim country, there's no way that it makes like England or whatever overall in the long term better than Pakistan. That's number one. Number two is that, like, when I think of, maybe he was thinking about it like just, he's talking about Pakistan specifically. But when I think of the topic, I was thinking more about, okay, Muslim country, living in a Muslim country, living amongst Muslims.
Oh, right.
And that's where it's like, okay, if Pakistan's like that bad, then we can look for other places or this or that kind of thing, right? Maybe a third thing that comes to mind is, like, I believe he said he was living there for like 6 months or something, 8 months.
It wasn't super long
in
comparison to others, but
so I think if it's less than a year, then that's different. If it's going to be, firstly, if you're committing to live in a place, and then you go ahead and live there for 2-3 years plus, I think, assuming you have the resources, you would navigate around these issues, right? Like a lot of people, they would get like a generator, for example, for when the electricity goes out. Or you would find like a masjid which like isn't questionable, or you would, you know what I mean? You would eventually find friends or neighbors or whatever who are a bit more like-minded. So that's a factor as well. But I mean, I think it all makes sense, but I just would never agree to the idea that the UK is just as good as Pakistan. Because I feel like the number one problem of living in the US, UK, whatever, the number one problem is the fact that you're a minority, the fact that it's not normal to be Muslim. That is the biggest problem in terms of it creates inferiority complex, it creates awkward situations. And that is the biggest problem, especially if we're talking about like young people and your kids and stuff like that. So that's like actually the number one reason I advise people not to like live in the West if possible, for that reason. And you can escape that living in Pakistan, because everyone is Muslim. Even if they're even like Ahmadi, whatever, that you wouldn't consider them Muslim maybe, but they call themselves Muslim, they talk about Allah and the Prophet ﷺ, and that alone is better than people who are like, who's Allah, mate? You know, it's still better, right? So that's general thoughts, Yanni.
Yeah, although, like you said, it brings new challenges on its own. But maybe the context of his discussion was mainly like, if you've got a choice out of all these Muslim countries,
Pakistan
which one
not
would
the
you
one.
pick? And I, the only reason, look, I wasn't this. I think when I was talking about Pakistan as a place of hijrah, it was more for Pakistanis,
of course,
really, because that makes the most sense. You know, and even like as great as Turkey might be for yourself and for others that I know that have gone there, I still would be apprehensive to move there because I'm not Turkish. You know, I haven't got that nationality. I think obviously, I think I think UAE or Dubai or whatever, which is like a popular choice for a lot of people. I think that's a popular choice for those that don't have a foundation at all.
Stateless.
For don't have a foundation at all in any sort of Muslim country, because having a foundation comes with so many benefits. Like just the fact that I've got Tunisian citizenship in a Tunisian passport, and now my kids. Actually, you just reminded me. I need to go and pick up my son's Tunisian passport. It's been there for like 2 months. But just the fact that they've got that comes with so many added benefits.
Oh, definitely.
That actually me thinking of anywhere else is just a bit of an uphill battle in itself.
Yeah. Game changer, yeah.
Yeah, no doubt, and it obviously, Tunisia has its issues, and we spoke about that. And actually, Pakistan has got so many more benefits than Tunisia, just in the terms of being, Islamic in your openness. Just those issues don't necessarily exist as much. It seems, at least in Pakistan, like you could wear a thobe and have a beard, and yeah, you might get a funny look in some certain communities, but you're not going to get vilified or demonized by people.
Actually,
as
when
far
I
as
was
I can
listening to
tell.
the podcast, I was thinking, wait, why would you wear a thobe in Pakistan? Like maybe you would stand out in it versus.
Oh right, yeah, of course. But any sort of traditional sort of clothing like that is still very much alive there.
Yeah.
Whilst you have other post-colonial nations that are very much westernized, and any tradition really has kind of gone out of the window, which is a shame. And I kind of felt like a while ago that we were reversing that trend, but it kind of seems to have come back quite with teeth, so to speak, in certain arenas.
So like we're not in like big cities, but where you're from in Tunisia, if you wear a thobe, like would that be weird?
No, I don't think so. I mean, not where I live, at least. But I do remember, like, certain times I would wear one, and I would be with my dad, and we'd be going into some government building or a courthouse or something, and he would be very like he'd either tell me to wait outside or take it off and put something else on or something like that. Now I don't know if that was him being cautious or if there was actually a reason for that. I do remember like there were certain clothes you can't wear at like certain government buildings. Like you couldn't wear shorts, for example, that's not like you've got a court case or anything. Just the building itself to go in, you couldn't wear shorts or something like that. I'm not talking about short shorts, obviously. I'm talking about ankle length stuff. So even that was a bit of a. It's weird, isn't it? And to be honest, there's so many things like that.
You got to respect the government, bro. Respect the courthouse.
Maybe,
Respect
but to be honest,
judge. Yeah.
There's so many small little cultural norms and stuff that you wouldn't pick up on unless you lived there, and that's not just Tunisia; that's across the world.
Yes.
And it's interesting actually because I just read, like I was looking at Japan recently just out of curiosity and looking at some forums and stuff, people talking about living in Japan, and I can't give you an example off the top of my head, but there's definitely things like that, like certain cultural things. There was one. There was like you can't eat and walk at the same time. Like you don't do that in Japan. It's considered like really offensive and people don't do it. Someone mentioned this to me as well, but I'm not sure how true it is. But apparently they don't have very many public bins, like refuse bins, because people are generally expected to take their rubbish home with them. Things like that, like little things like that you wouldn't really know unless you're there. So you've got to be aware of that, and you've got to be aware of that change. And I do think I value very much so my parents letting me have a couple of years in Tunisia when I was young. I, as much as I might have hated it when I was young, definitely see the benefit now, because I could honestly be dropped there and just life continues, while somebody who's never ever had an extended period in a country like that and has only ever gone abroad to touristic areas. When you go to Morocco, or when you go to Turkey, or when you go to these famous Muslim holiday destinations, you go for a holiday and you go for a good time. And a lot of Muslims aren't ready for the other side of that, and actually the normal life beyond that, behind that and under the carpet, so to speak. And I think if you've never lived that, you're going to have a culture shock, and maybe that isn't for you, So what do you think about that, bro? I don't know what kind of life you've had in Algeria. So is that been a similar sort of style?
Bro, whenever I go to Algeria, I try and live like my family, like my cousins and stuff that I'm visiting, because I'm always like living with an uncle or cousins and stuff like that. So I was always just one to blend in. Some of my other cousins that visit from France and stuff, they were a bit different in that sense, where it's like they needed to have certain things, certain way kind of thing. I was more
Right.
like just blend in. So in that sense, I guess it wasn't as holiday-ish as it could have been. But of course, it was still a holiday, bro, in terms of like, it's a temporary mindset, right? It's like I'm here for a few weeks and
And you're not working.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the longest I stayed was 2 months, I think, in one go. So 2 months, after about 1 month, 6 weeks, it does start to feel a bit different. And when you
Yeah.
know you're staying there, that long, it is a bit different. But and I'm always curious. When I'm there, I'm trying to like, okay, so how much do teachers earn, and how do you go about doing this, and I was generally like always up for like going on these like mashwar, like, my cousin got to do this at this government thing, or
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah,
collect
yeah.
his grades or whatever. I was always up for that stuff, so I guess I experienced stuff that way. At the same time, my wife always reminds me that I've only experienced like one part of Algeria, like geographically, and so
Yes.
people are different and places are different as well. But yeah, I think, bro, overall, when you commit to something, whether it's a country or a job or a career or anything like that, a skill, having kids, commit to anything, you actually succeed. You're more likely to succeed in it, right? So
Yeah.
if I came to Turkey thinking, let me give this 3 months, that would be different. I mean, I've come across people who just came here like 3 weeks ago, and they're like, yeah, I'm here for 10, 20, 30 years. I'm here, like, I'm learning the language, I'm this, I'm that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
just the mindset of like, I'm committed will change everything about it, And my
Yeah.
friend actually that listens to the podcast, he came to Turkey, but everything he did was like, it's temporary, right? Even though he was like, yeah, I'll see, it seems good, this and that. But for example, he got a furnished flat, which means he didn't have to invest in furniture, right? He got
Right.
a flat where he could leave with just 1 month's notice. He got this and that. Like everything he got was like so that he could pick up and leave whenever he wanted. And
Yes.
what if he had like a 12-month rental contract and he paid, like he spent 2,000-3,000 pounds on furniture and this, and what if he had committed more in that way? Would he have left now? Because he left now, right? Would he have left? Like there's basically the more you commit and the more you invest in something, the more likely you're just going to try and find ways to make it work, I think.
Yeah, I see what you mean by that. And it reminds me in a weird way of Sharif and, Muslim Homesteader, because that's a lifestyle that you've decided to adopt, and you can't just jump ship on that. That is very much a lifelong investment. Now, someone could say, "Oh, you're in America, you got this and this and this." Yeah, but not out there. There's still the burdens and hardships, but there's also the benefits. And I think ultimately, you have to be prepared. Even though I haven't made that jump myself, I could just see it. If I was to do it, I'd have to understand that I'm only going out of one trial into another. Okay, that's
Yeah.
essentially what it is. But you're just picking the trial that is more safer for your deen, so to speak. Like, would you like to live in the facilitation of all these comforts, but the deen is in danger, or would you like to take those facilitations away, but have a more safer environment for your deen? And that's basically it. Now, yes, you could be there. You could start living there. Your deen's safer, but then suddenly the burdens of the dunya start piling up on you. And I've got a queue for this, and the bureaucracy of it all, and I have to jump from here to here to here just to get one thing done, and etc. 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 Right? And then
Out
you're
of
like,
the
why
frying
did I do
pan
this?
into the boiling
Yes.
water.
Well, yes, absolutely. But at the end of the day, it's your deen that's going to get boiled, because you could come back to the UK and be like, oh, this is so much better. In the first few weeks, you're loving life. And
Yes.
you're like, yes, I can just go on Uber Eats and get whatever I want, or all these things, right?
Yes.
But not realizing actually that is all dunya. And once again, you forgot the reason why you left.
However, on the flip side, I do see where Swalafi was coming from, when it's like sometimes a lot of the stuff he was talking about, it's not luxuries, bro. It's literally like having electricity, or like when you get a taxi, you don't feel like you're going to crash and die at any moment, or like your wife can walk down the street without being stared at. Like, these are not luxuries, these are basics. And so if you feel you really can't find ways around that in a place, then that would be definitely problematic, even if it's a Muslim country.
I mean, look, your one thing I think to balance it is actually like your family has rights over you. you have rights over yourself. And if you've got the ability to attain Allah's blessings and you deliberately choose not to, as if you're a zahid in that sense, then I think that's a bit questionable. Allah's given you the ability to make a move that benefits you and your family, and to take some of His blessings, so to speak. Then take it, of course. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, if Allah has given you the ability, then don't feel guilty for taking that. It's a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's the way you have to see it. Because you could say, oh, I've got the money to go somewhere better, I've got the money to live in a nicer environment, but no, I need to live here amongst the people that are struggling, and I need to struggle just as much as they are, etc. Now, obviously, you could, if you really had it in you, you could turn around and try and improve the environment you're in. Although I'm not sure how much effect you'll have in a big city, but certainly in a smaller village or whatever, and it reminds me a little bit of, I don't know the details necessarily, but look at Abu Bakr and the Spot Project. I am assuming that where the orphanage is and all those facilities are, there wasn't anything like that before. So he's actually started that, he's implemented that, and he's pretty much there a lot of the time, isn't he? And you can see, if you follow them on Instagram and stuff, you could see the kind of stuff they're doing. And stuff like that has always appealed to me. Like, even the little village that I'm from, I've always had a big dream to just do stuff in that village, like start stuff, build playgrounds, do all sorts of things for people, because that's a bit more empowering, Have you ever... Here's a question for you, just to test your Britishness. When you go to a shop or you go to some sort of establishment in the UK, and you see a little charity box, and it's very much a British charity. Could be for like the ambulance, or the air ambulance is quite a popular one, or the Coast Guard or something. And that, they're just going to save lives, right? Do you donate, or do you hesitate?
I don't usually give to those things.
This is what I mean. But like, if you were in a Muslim country, you wouldn't really hesitate, would you? You'd just be like, oh yeah.
I mean, I think I'm talking 50, about something on that, on what you're talking about. I'm 50-50.
It's all about ownership of the country you live in.
Yeah, I get that.
I think that's the issue that you've got in your heart.
So firstly, I don't tend to give money with cash like that. So that would, be a barrier. But I remember once I went, some sheikh or something recommended a charity which was to help people with eyesight issues, right?
Yeah.
I genuinely thought it was like a non-Muslim charity, and it was Ramadan, and I went to give. But then when I got there, it was actually turned out to be Muslims running it.
Oh, right, yeah.
But the way, on the surface, it was not Muslim kind of thing. But I was cool to do that. I was like, yeah, still going to good. But when you've got £10 to give, you're generally going to give it to Muslims, aren't you?
Yeah.
But your point of ownership, exactly, giving to the ambulance in the UK versus in Tunisia, I would consider the one in Tunisia just more beneficial, I suppose, overall.
Yeah, but that's the thing, isn't it? It's just that weird conflict that you have in yourself, because whether it's the air ambulance, whether it's the paramedics, whether it's fire service, whatever, or Coast Guard, for example, if something happened to you, they'd also save you, and they would save your sister, and they would save your brother, and they would save you. Do you understand? And it's just I don't know what it is. It's a weird complex, because I've even thought about it, and I've tried to break it down in my mind. It's what is it that I'm hesitating for? And it could be, for some people, it could be, I don't know how accurate these funds are, and I don't know if they're really going to where they're going, etc. You could use those same arguments for Muslim charities, and there's been Muslim charities, unfortunately, that have, had allegations of such misuse and stuff. Obviously, not all of them. Obviously, there's been a couple, and a couple is all it takes to kind of put complex in your mind, right?
Yeah.
But I think it does go back to that ownership, and it's do I feel like I'm part of this society? Do I feel like I belong here? There's going to be some Muslims that do not blink at all. They don't hesitate. They just do it.
Have you ever met any like
that? I've certainly met. Obviously, I haven't seen them do it, but I've met Muslims that are certainly, okay, you've seen it, bro. I'm sure you've spoken to some people or seen some Muslims that are I'm a British Muslim. Blah, 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 blah. And that is there, despite the fact, I'm not talking about reverts here, because I think reverts is a slightly different scenario, right? But I'm talking about individuals like me and you who have parents from, back home. We might have been born in the UK, but we've got a bit of a
Melange.
This, or we've got this kind of we don't really know where home is kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difficulty because I don't, at work, if you were to be working among non-Muslims, if they were to ask you, oh, do you consider yourself British, and you said no, I think it would shock a few people because they wouldn't expect that kind of answer, unless obviously you were born abroad. But it is a very strange complex that I still can't really put my finger on. And at the end of the day, it is all arbitrary, isn't it? And it doesn't really mean anything.
I think like with stuff like the ambulance, part of like my thinking behind it is that giving money to the ambulance is like developing the ambulance service, which is developing the country. Which, if I have a choice to develop a country, I'll develop a Muslim one, especially because they're, in need of development. I mean, like the UK is in dire need of development in some areas, no doubt. But obviously, priority goes to Muslims. I think that's normal amongst Muslims, right?
But it goes to show: do the Muslims that consider themselves British consider that they will be here forever?
Absolutely.
And
they never
think
question
about
it, really, would they?
Yeah, and I think the only reason I always consider it not forever is because of the ahadith of the future and akhir zaman.
Oh really?
And all these kind of definitely. Because I always think, okay, if the Dajjal was to come tomorrow, what side of the fence would I like to be on? Would I like to be on the Muslim world or would I like to be on the non-Muslim world? You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And that always plays on my mind. Even with hijrah talk, I always tell my wife, like, well, surely there's going to be a time where we're going to have to, it's almost like the clash of civilizations inevitability thing. I personally, based on what I see and read of Akhir Zaman and the end times, etc., I always think, well, I don't feel like this is forever, unless I don't know, by some miracle, the UK or whatever becomes a Muslim country. Now there are some people, no doubt, that have that ambition. There are some people that have that ambition, and Allah is capable of all things. I wouldn't discount that. However, obviously everyone can make their judgment on what they think is going to happen and not. So it's interesting thinking of it that way.
That stuff doesn't cross my mind much when it comes to like where I would live, because
really
it's more just like, even if that was 500 years away, I would just be thinking about my iman and my duty towards my kids' iman and those kind of things. And that's the main reason.
That's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting that we've got those different thoughts because we don't usually differ too much. But that literally, I kid you not, is always on my mind with this stuff. Always. And I don't know why. I think it's because I think it became a lot more on my mind since COVID, because I saw how quickly the world can change.
Absolutely.
And I realized...
And you see how maybe the bridges can be drawn up where you can't even leave a country if you want to. Yeah,
absolutely. So like, you said, oh, even if that's 500 years away, but then when I started putting things into, perspective, I was like, dude, the world can change overnight in some cases. The world can change. Like if there was a, new super COVID tomorrow, boom, that's it. Like world changes. If there was, all this UFO stuff that we were talking about before and the Pentagon doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
If they suddenly thought, oh, there's this thing now and it just becomes unveiled and they lift the veil on whatever it is, whether it's real or not, boom, the world changes once again, you know, and it's just, everything can just completely. So if the Dajjal was to appear tomorrow, the world would change overnight. Now, I know there's, indications in certain hadith about timescales and stuff, but I don't think they ever go beyond. I know there's some things that happen in the span of 40 years, there's some things that happen in the span of a couple of years. You know what I mean? So there is that leeway in certain aspects. However, that's still within somebody's lifetime, isn't it? And it could be within one person's lifetime that all this changes. So that's why I always consider, like, hey, if it's not me, it could be my kids. And what side of the fence do I want them on?
Well, if you're thinking like that, then what about where I am, bro? Like, I'm in the hot spot of all that stuff.
Yeah. But also you're you've got ease of access to either side of the fence as well.
Yeah.
Right
between Europe and Asia, yeah?
Absolutely. That's what it's all about.
I mean, I have thought about that a little bit. Like, as far as I understand, the Malhama, like the huge battle, will actually take place in modern day Turkey.
Right.
You know,
That's why you're there. Getting a front
nah.
row seat. Allah.
So that could be a positive or a negative, you know, because I have kind of thought about this. Like, okay, let's say there's a battle, and you have the courage to be on the right side of the battle, but but your family's right next to the battle as well.
Of
So
course, yeah.
I
I
don't
mean,
know. I
bro,
don't think
stuff like
really you
this.
can plan for these things.
No, you can't. But at the same time, um, although there is a big fitna that have been prophesized, there's also a big fitna is just a mirror of as a cousin of a smaller fitna, isn't it? So all these smaller battles that happen all the time, or they're happening all the time,
Yeah.
and it's just interesting what battle you want to prepare yourself for.
Yes.
Like the stuff that's happening, the stuff that we spoke about. We did a few episodes ago. We did, the what is a woman stuff, and like I always say to my wife, I see it on the TV, I see it on the news, I see all sorts of stuff, and I honestly cannot believe that this is happening a lot of the time. Like I see the stuff that's on the libs of TikTok and all this other stuff, and I honestly sit there in absolute disbelief because this was unimaginable to me. Like I'd never predicted this. You could always have these visions of the future, and I don't know if maybe some of you, some of the listeners or yourself, even, I mean, if you've ever predicted this would happen. I never ever considered it would be like this, like society would be like this before. So, and it reminds me of every generation before me who said the same about the society that they're in when they're older. Like, when I was a kid, my dad would say the same thing about when my childhood in the early 2000s, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting
There are some
how far we can go.
there are some trends that are, we can kind of guess that they're coming, and people that with more expertise will be able to see the future, predict things a bit better, right, and have a clearer picture. But stuff like that, like socially engineered stuff like that, I don't know. I feel like that's harder to predict than stuff like climate change and
Yeah.
how the world will
Well,
respond to it.
people
Like,
that have
I was thinking, yeah, this is a trend. We talked about one trend, which was climate change will, quote unquote, necessitate countries to work together almost in a, one world government kind of way, right?
right.
Then you stack that with the whole corona thing and how that kind of might need a one world government response, right? Like a very united response to deal with it well. But then the third layer, right, is a bit of a weird one, is the metaverse. Like if tens of millions of people are like on the metaverse, that it becomes its kind of its own jurisdiction. And
Absolutely, yeah.
who's going to govern that jurisdiction? Like it might be that, no, it's not enough that the laws in the country that the player is in or the user is in, that might not be enough. They might say, no, we need its own jurisdiction, the metaverse's own jurisdiction, which is governed by this like one world government thing as well. So I think like that's a prediction that I would make, and I would be quite, confident something of that sort is going to come about. Whether it like controls every country on the planet or whether it's like an EU kind of style thing,
Yeah.
I don't know. But that's a trend for sure. But like, like for example, they say this whole like trans movement and LGBT and all that, it kind of was pushed, or actually maybe more accurately, the whole what's it called? Critical race theory, right? Critical race theory, third wave feminism. This stuff was pushed apparently by university professors in the 70s or something. And I guess it continued after that into the 80s and all that. And what we're seeing now is the result of that generation being taught that stuff and that stuff being pushed on them. Yes? So you could have people who are very in the know, and they were in the universities at that time in the US or whatever, and they're seeing that these ideas are being pushed by, okay, that professor and that one, and they went to this other uni and they're saying it and they're saying it. And you could, I guess if you're in the know to that level, you could say, yeah, I see where this is going. But it's very few people that would be on the ground to see that, I think. And that's partially as well because of less media coverage of these little details of things that we have now.
But I suppose for me, it's like the fear is like, at least in my lifetime, I've never seen anything rolled back. in that regard. So all these new theories that come about and all these new things that become accepted, I've never seen anything become accepted and then roll back and like, oh no, we can't
Yeah.
really accept that. Do you know
But
what I
I
mean?
would
And then
expect
it
that
just
to, like, I would never expect something to come full force and then disappear in one generation, like, you know, in our
no, of
lifetime.
course,
Because let's say this LGBT stuff, like, let's say there's some big backlash, right? Some big virus that only affects them, or some sort of societal ill that comes out of it that's like very clear black and white. That will take like it takes almost a half a generation for the agenda even to arrive, and that'll take half a generation or more for the negative effects to be seen, and then it
yeah.
might take another half generation for people to actually mobilize and say, okay, well, we're gonna like pull this back. So it might take 2 full generations for the cycle.
But it's never out of people's own, it's always out of like a third party event, so to speak, or like an outside
Yes,
force.
yes, not
Whether
yeah,
it's disease or whether it's like look at smoking, for example. Like smoking
yes, yeah,
was
that's a good
popular.
example.
The thing is, though, the thing is with smoking is that it never was wrong and then became right. This is what I'm trying to say. It started
Sure,
as fine and
yeah,
then it became wrong. And
yeah,
a lot of examples I try and think of start fine and then they
yeah,
become wrong.
okay,
It's hard to find something that was wrong,
yeah,
then became right,
yeah,
then became wrong again. And that's what I'm trying. Like I'm really racking my
yeah,
brain around this, trying
yeah.
to think of something like that. Um, uh, I
What
mean, it could be
about
if you look on a large scale, you've got the deen, right? You've
yeah,
got on a wider scale, generational scale, you've got it was always tawheed, and then shirk was wrong. Shirk happened. Shirk became normal. Shirk became normalized. But then the prophets had to be sent to realign the people to
yeah,
tawheed again, right? But that's over generations and generations and generations. And look what happened to, unfortunately, many of the prophets that came with that message, right?
yeah?
But that's Islam,
What
and
about
that's
secularism? Like in Christian countries before, like you couldn't separate church and state, right? So secularism was bad. Then it
yeah.
became good. Like now, like secularism's kind of accepted.
But it's not going back, is it?
Yeah, and then is it
That's what
going
I'm
back?
saying. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
We need to find an example of
there are
something,
no
and hopefully,
signs of it
inshallah.
going back actually.
Yeah, if inshallah, if the listeners can think of an example, because that's what I'm really, because I'm trying to consider, could the way the world is going, the way the world's, because I consider it as an unraveling, bro. I consider it's unraveling, and
Yeah,
the only way that I can feasibly think of things going back to any sort of past time is
yeah,
if there is some sort of massive
yeah.
large scale calamity,
External,
such
yeah,
such as a war, like a world war, or something that just changes the shape of the world.
yeah.
Because to be honest, Achi, the examples I was thinking was every time a society, a civilization would get to a certain extreme, Allah would destroy it. That's the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that regard. Like look at Pompeii, for example. Like Pompeii, what was it known for? It was known for this, this, and this, and this, and this. And then Mount Vesuvius blows up and the whole civilization just gets eradicated. Look at the Qawm Lut, whole civilization gets eradicated. All these transgressing societies that we have in the Quran, they don't take heed, they don't turn back, they get destroyed, and look,
Yeah.
and that's what happens. It takes like even ancient Egypt. The civilizations get either destroyed through war or famine or all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hostile takeovers, isn't it? Sometimes it's complete takeovers from an external force
Yeah.
that changes the society completely.
Yeah.
This is what I mean. So I don't know. I can't think of an example, even in modern day,
Yeah.
of something like that. To
I guess
try and
that's the
base
cycle then, yeah. Like an
Yeah.
external force comes in
which
and kind of resets the clock.
which is why I'm saying, what side of the fence do you want to be on?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, we may have a higher chance. I mean, we know, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, that the Muslim world, in some capacity, will return back to Islam. Okay, we don't have that. We don't have that guarantee for this neck of the woods, so to speak.
Yeah.
We know that there will be a time when Isa alayhi salam will return, and the Muslims will rally right behind him, and we know where that's going to be. And I'd rather be in those neighboring areas, even if it's North Africa, because at least there's an
That's
identity
pretty far
there.
away.
It's far away. It's
Yeah.
Al Maghrib, of course. It's far away, but there's still masajid. And if hypothetically, bro, if number one, obviously to clarify, I'm only saying North Africa because that's where I'm from, because of
Yeah.
the foundation.
Yeah.
If I didn't have the choice, I'd go even closer to the to where those future safety areas are meant to be. It's like, look at the Palestinians, Akhi. There's people in Palestine that refuse to leave despite the fact that they had the opportunity to. There are many Palestinians that through no choice of their own, they had to leave and go to Europe and go to America, etc. There's some that no doubt they had a choice, but they refused to go. Some out of love for their land, and some out of love for the deen, no doubt, and some for both, obviously. And I remember coming across a hadith, which I'd love to find if I had the time, about, I don't know if you've ever read it, about near the end times. I'm paraphrasing completely here, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but near the end times, someone will have a plot of land in Sham that's small, like very small, but it'll mean more than the whole dunya and everything in it. I need to find a hadith because last time it really started rising up in Palestine and Israel and stuff. I came across it and I just thought it was so powerful. And I think it was like, yes, it was a piece of land that overlooks Masjid al-Aqsa. That was the specificity of it. And there was actually a news story. That's where I saw it. It was a news story of this lady that had a house in Jerusalem that overlooked Al-Quds. It had a beautiful view, and she refused to give it up, despite all the pressure around her. And it was absolutely powerful. It was so powerful. And it reminds me, like, yes, if you had that, Akhi, if you had a land in Palestine, or you had, a place in Mecca or Medina, and you had the opportunity to leave, to come to the West, you'd be out of your absolute mind, and that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking of.
Yes. I think I don't know if it's a hadith or it's just something that Umar ibn Khattab said about before Allah would destroy people for their sins. So like you do a sin, shirk, this and that, then like almost immediately you'll get destroyed. But he said now that doesn't happen. Now Allah will hold you accountable Yawm al-Qiyamah for the sin, and you won't be destroyed. Basically, people won't be destroyed. So it's not that direct, I guess. At the same time, there's also just the pattern of rise and fall of everyone.
Yes, yeah, of course.
And that's another kind of trend or forecast that people talking about now. I guess with the inflation and stuff being a hot topic, is that the dollar's gonna crash like. I remember reading, 10 years ago, people talking about the dollar crashing, right? But for me, that's not something to prove that it's not happening or going to happen. It's just that, okay, that was the early news. Now we're getting closer to the, actual event, right? And it's been a decades-long process, I guess, since they decoupled it from the dollar, from the gold and all that gold standard. It's been happening. And even Ray Dalio, this very big hedge fund manager, he's like part of his like legacy before, as he gets older and stuff, he's wrote these books about how the world economy works, or like, there's like, maybe you've seen them, these animated videos explaining how the economy works, and like how the interest rates affect this and how the debt affects that and all that. They did it in a really like good or animated way. One thing he's like predicting, or what he was saying, is the cycle is always like you get extravagance and you decouple the like standard gold thing from debt, and then it collapses, right? And then a new civilization comes and does that. So like a lot of things are pointing towards the US, like, how do you say it, dominance in the world, like collapsing. And the main thing that would cause that to happen is the dollar collapsing, right? That's the main power they have in the world, really. Way more than the military and stuff. So that's a trend as well. And that is something that would cause shockwaves in terms of the balance of the world and all of that. So there are these trends, man, like...
Yeah, and when you're in them, you think that it's never going to happen. It's going to be there forever.
Yeah, like, you can imagine the US, they're like, America, baby.
But, when they start, the thing is, when they start, they're cautious. Every civilization, when it reaches its point of power, it's cautious. But then it gets comfortable, and then it wanes away. And it like, look at Rome, bro. Like Rome, people who lived under Rome just never thought that Rome could be defeated. I mean, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, غُلِبَتِ الرُّومُ. And people couldn't believe that. But then it happened. Yes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So So this is what I'm trying to say. Like people that were living in the height of, the great American dream,
Yeah.
probably never thought this was, oh
Yeah.
yeah, with all the technology, what could ever go wrong?
Yeah.
And now we've got nuclear weapons. No one's ever
Yeah.
going to fire them.
Or even
It's a
today.
stalemate.
Even
Yeah.
today, I'm sure like there are people thinking like, yeah, we've got problems now, but we've had problems before and we'll overcome it. Like in the US, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Or like think about all the examples, man. Like Israel and Palestine and stuff. Like I'm sure, like there are people like living in Palestine who are like, yeah, this Israel thing is here to stay. And then there are other people who are like they're just kind of biding their time till they collapse, and they're so certain that it's going to collapse. Or like
of course.
Algeria, like people in Algeria waited 132 years, right?
Yeah,
That's like
absolutely.
multiple generations. So what, like 20, 30, 40 years into the occupation of Algeria or any country really, but I'm saying Algeria because one of the longest colonizations. At what point, like what decade into the colonization do you start thinking, well, I guess this is just the new thing?
Well, but the thing is, the risk is always there. Like Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, they could have been Spain, bro. They could have been what Spain is today, where Spain was Muslim, and then they all got messy, and then the Christians took over. And now look at it. Like, where is Islam there, so to speak? Apart from some remnants of buildings, architecture, and some names and places, discounting all the immigrants that have come from North Africa or other places. So yeah, in that regard, it could be either or. Like Algeria could have been, some other Latinized name for the country, and completely eradicate the native population in that regard.
Yeah. I guess the overall lesson is literally like تلك الأيام نداولها بين الناس. Like
yes,
like now, like let's say I was in UAE comfortable, this and that, or Qatar's like probably one of the most comfortable things because they got enough gas reserves for their tiny population to last like 6,000 years. Yeah. But no matter where, like whether you're in a Muslim country, you're feeling like, yeah, it's very stable and comfortable, or you're in a Kafir country, it's like very like unstable, whatever, that won't last most likely. Like no matter whether it's good or bad situation.
It's interesting actually, because the lesson that we draw here is that everybody tries different things. Everybody seeks honor in different places. And it's actually only those that ever stuck to Islam and honored Islam and have sought honor through Islam that remained. In the moment they lost that and started chasing other forms of honor and other forms of success, they were decimated. And that's the bottom line. And of course, we haven't necessarily had an example of a Muwahid nation from the dawn of time that has lasted through every single calamity. We haven't had that. But it doesn't mean that we don't strive for that. We don't strive to do that. So,
but also, like when those civilizations of Muslims collapsed, it didn't mean that every individual Muslim like lost their way in it.
Oh, of course,
it just meant as a civilization, it kind of lost its way. And civilizations, wallah, they're things extremely hard to keep together. I feel, when you look at the, like, I guess I'm exposed to a lot of American stuff, and you just see the arguments and debates they constantly have. They don't know what to do really and truly with their country. All the social issues they have.
Well,
and I
was going to say on that though, it's because they don't have a divine constitution to follow in that regard.
Yeah.
Now, with Muslims, you could argue that you have the blueprint, but the reason you collapse is because you sway away from it and try and do other things. Even
then, it's still difficult. Even with the Quran and the Sunnah, you have shaitan, you have just little arguments, bro. Petty little things cause issues, and that's like reminds me of the ayah, like of if you brought everyone together to try and like, no way, I'm getting mixed up. There's an ayah about basically how the Prophet ﷺ was able to bring the tribes together and they were warring and everything. And it's only by Allah's will that could ever happen because of how like difficult it is, basically, And
Allah's created us all as different people and different languages, etc., different tribes, different nations, different races, etc.
What I'm trying to say is the only thing keeping societies together is literally Allah's will. Like
Absolutely.
The natural. I feel like the natural way of things is not to have order per se.
But I always, the same way though, I always, like, all I can ever envision is like, look at Lot alayhi salam and his family, and him being commanded to leave the town and not look back,
Yeah.
right? And that's because, number one, Allah's punishment was coming to that town, but also for him not to be punished alongside them. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, at what point, like, obviously we haven't got angels coming to us and telling us what point to leave. We haven't got that benefit. However, that is a lesson in and of itself, that when the scales are becoming tipped and there's not much effect that you can have anymore, and you can't change this area, then it's time to pack up and go, because you could be caught up in the destruction that will inevitably befall it. And I think that goes back to what I was thinking earlier when I said, oh, what side of the fence do I want to be on? Because when I don't feel like we're making a dent in these Western societies, yes, we're trying to engage, but I think we're doing well right now. I think, even, at least, I mean, it's hard. It's easy to say, oh, look, the online world is a representation of the Muslim movement in the UK, but the online world is a representation for a lot of things. And I think, yes, we do have a lot of critical Muslim thinkers, professionals that are out there trying to spread the message of Islam on a wide platform, on the widest of platforms in this day and age, to millions and millions of Westerners, so to speak, non-Muslims. If we're still not making large dents and huge benefits, and actually things are just getting more and more and more difficult, and it doesn't look like we're gonna re-ravel that yo-yo that can never go back. Maybe a yo-yo is a bad example. What's something that you can unravel but then you can't really put it back?
There is that whole what's it, thingy's box, one of these Greek names.
I'm thinking of something like that. It's not Pandora. Is it Pandora's box?
Yeah, it is. That's it. Pandora's box. That is I don't know exactly the details, but it's like the thing that once it comes out, can't go back.
Yeah, and that's it. It's kind of like that, bro. And the only way of getting rid of it is, unfortunately,
like
calamities.
Can you imagine? Yeah, I was just thinking. Can you imagine, like, photos, images of like Muslims packing out Heathrow Airport, and it's like the headline says like Muslims like decide to leave, this and that, yeah, and it's and it's literally because they just see such wrongdoing, such fahisha, like in the streets and everywhere, that they don't leave because they're Iman, because it's not comfortable. Literally, they leave because they're like, look, at any moment, Allah might destroy this land, right?
Yeah.
And
but
that's rarely like a reason given. But I'm sure in the past, people have left countries just because of the fear of that.
Yeah, and it's happening. But the thing is, it is happening now. We wouldn't be having this conversation otherwise. There wouldn't be YouTube channels that are all about hijrah. There wouldn't be all of this stuff, this debate. We wouldn't be talking about it in the group chat all the time. It's happening. It's just happening at different paces for different people.
But I would challenge you, because think about it. Like, most of the Muslims came to the UK in like what, the 60s?
Yeah, but
even after that,
not
right?
For their deen, though.
Yeah, okay. They came in the 60s, 70s, let's say, like a large portion of them. Okay. So how long is it since then? Is it been like 50 years? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been 50 years. Like, the first few decades was just about survival. And there was quite a bit of racism and this and that in the 70s, 80s. So it's normal. Like, I would say, like, that makes sense if it took 20, 30 years just to get stable. And then it might take you another decade to like have some semblance, some sort of dignity and a bit of weight, right?
Yeah.
And so if there was to be a big change and like dawah was to go extremely well in the UK, I would expect that it would take longer than 50 years. So
Of course. Although I always question, like, I'm not making a sweeping judgment on everyone that came over here. My parents are people that came over here. So I always see these fatwa from ulama in today's climate that say, like, yes, it's permissible to go to a country, a non-Muslim country, to study, for example, to seek a benefit that you can bring back with you. But to move there, to leave the Muslim lands just for the sake of it, is impermissible. And then I wonder, well, what fatwa were around during those times, 50 years ago? And I'd like to think, I'd assume it'd be the same thing. And a lot of people that came to this country didn't necessarily come because they were like, oh, I can practice my deen easier here. There may have been some persecuted minorities that did, no doubt.
Yeah, very unlikely.
But the majority is going to be for economic benefit and for better, dunya, so to speak.
Yeah.
And actually, it isn't until you come here, you become marginalized, you become put in a box that you suddenly try and hold on to whatever it is that you identify as and become stronger in your deen. And that's certainly what I felt when the EDL came to town, made me feel this small. And actually, that is what spurred me to start practicing and learning more about my religion because of that marginalization. So, and yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like, I know for a fact, like my granddad, my dad came here, and my mother's father, so my granddad came here. They were the decision makers, so to speak. My father's father didn't want him coming to the UK at all. Didn't want him coming to Europe. He said, "Why would you want to go over there?" And he tried to get him a job in Tunisia. He got him like this cool bank job or whatever. Obviously, I'm not saying bank jobs are good, but he got him something there, stable there, and he was like, "Don't leave, don't leave."
Yeah.
And even now, when I was in Tunisia recently, I told you about this already, where there was this woman in front of me, and she was like, "I'd rather die, I'd rather kill my son than let him leave and go to Europe." So a lot of people, my granddad, my mum's father, as far as I remember, it was because they needed workers here. They came over and basically invited people to come and work in the UK, and that's why he came. So it's always work, money. And alhamdulillah, obviously we're benefiting from that. I can't say I'm not. I'm sitting here in a room and I got the Wi-Fi is at however many megabytes per minute or whatever. I've got all sorts, alhamdulillah. But at the same time, I've got to be conscious that the seed this was built on wasn't a seed of Iman and wasn't a seed of Deen. And actually, if I don't change things, like Kaya said on a famous Hijrah episode, he said, if it isn't you that makes that change, it becomes even harder for the generations after. It becomes harder for my kids and their kids. And you've seen that dilution, no doubt. You've seen fourth generation children that are completely gone from their roots.
Yeah. And actually, that's another trend that I believe is happening, is after decades of globalization to the maximum, some countries are actually retracting from that and turning in on themselves. And the world is becoming more closed, not more open, right? And you see that with basically Russia getting cut off from the world economy, right? You see that with even Turkey, bro. Turkey, it might just be an election cycle thing, but Turkey's kind of turning a bit in on itself, right?
Yeah.
And as a lot of people talking about food crisis is coming, this and that, inflation and all that. When those things happen, hard times come, people start saying, okay, shut off for example, India banned export of wheat or something. They're like, look, we got to take care of number one, right? So we're not exporting. So the world, when things get tough, the world actually closes and it turns in on itself, and it tries to sort itself out at the expense of others and at the expense of trade and understanding and communication.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned that back in the mid 2010s was the height of my conspiracy theory phase, where I was clearly going through the rabbit hole of Illuminati, New World Order, this is what they want kind of thing. And do you know what got me out of that? What got me out of that was rationalizing that men will always be human beings and will always be men. And there was there's an ayah in the Quran regarding the kuffar of Mecca. I'll paraphrase it in English, but it's essentially, you think that they're all one, but don't consider that they're all one. They're all at each other's throats as well, And actually, no matter if there was hypothetically some big superpower Illuminati world-taking thing, they'd still probably just be men that actually have jealousy in their hearts for each other, will try one-up each other, will try backstab each other, and there is no continuous unity in kufr and in shirk, right? There isn't. You can never achieve that, because you can just look out in the world and that's the reality. I used to have this phase, bro, where I used to think all world leaders were all together and all shaking hands, and they're all when the mics and cameras are off, they're all pally and they're all trying to work towards this agenda across generations as well, not just those that are alive today. There's all this mission that unifies them. And actually rationalizing it, I was like, dude, as long if they're not lizard people, then they're human beings, bro. And if they're human beings, then they will fall into trying to outdo each other and backstab each other and destroy each other. So at the end of the day, like you said, yeah, if anyone's ever played Civilization or read about, feudal Japan or medieval England, these city states and this, of course we're going to go back to that. Like at the end of the day, bro, what you said earlier about, okay, India taking the wheat for itself. Well, that could then lead to another country not having any wheat at all. And the only choice they've got is to wage war against a country that does have wheat so they can have it.
Yeah.
And it goes back to exactly what we used to read about in history books.
Yes.
Resource wars.
Oh, that's the theory of like globalization, that as countries trade more with each other and they become more economically dependent on each other, then war will decrease. Right? That's the theory. But if that stops and it's like, no, let's actually become more independent of you guys, then it becomes, I can invade you now. I don't have as much to lose.
But there's no unifying force. That's the thing.
Yes.
There's no divine unifier like Islam, for example.
I'll tell you, though, there is some unifiers. One is Islam, like you said.
Yeah.
And for the people who really have taqwa, then that is the unifier. There is another unifier, which is shaitan, right? And shaitan whispers to people, and he's one person, like he's one jinn, like whispering to people, the same voice, the same message. And if he wishes that he gives the same message to all different people, then they will become united in a sense, not in the fundamental way, like you're saying, right? That's true.
Yeah.
But if he whispers them and pushes them in a direction of whatever globalization or nationalization or whatever, then generally you will see that manifest in the world, right? So that is a bit of a unifying factor as well. Although I agree, like deep down, like when things get tough, it's like if it's your good versus my good, then it's always going to be my good that I put forward.
No doubt. And it's fascinating. The stuff that tears people apart is also sin in and of itself. Murder, for example, theft, stealing, they're sins in itself. So shaitan could in a long-winded way unify people, but then also could decimate people because there's sins found in that too. And there's destruction found in that.
It's a short-lived unity, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this whole deglobalization, it's actually another reason to hurry up with whether, even if it's not moving to another country, but getting like passports, for example, because as countries get more closed, they will be less open to giving passports out, We've seen that like in Turkey. Before you invest $250,000, you get citizenship. Now it's 400.
Well, this is it,
right? And someone, I can't remember, some minister or something mentioned, now to get citizenship, you have to be proficient in Turkish and you have to do this and you have to do that.
Yeah.
So these things will happen as well. So the time's ticking a little bit in that sense. I don't want to create alarm, but it's like, it does make sense that if it's something that you might benefit from, it's better to do it sooner than later, right? I say this as my son still doesn't have a passport at all. Doesn't even have one.
Oh, no. But this is it. Like when I say the proverbial pick what side of the fence, it's because the fences are going up. They're going up slowly, but they're going up in some places faster than others. And maybe look,
sick. The image, bro. Yeah.
But one could argue I'm taking my time.
We're gonna build a wall and they pay for it. Yeah.
I've got privilege, and I admit that, and I acknowledge that I've got the privilege. I already have a citizenship in a Muslim country, and if it honestly became like, ideally anyway, not ideally, but if it became like a life or death situation, so to speak, well, I could always just go to Tunisia if I can still travel, So there is that element. So yeah, I'm taking my time, and I'm squeezing the lemon, so to speak, of this society, because as bad as that might sound to some people, I don't care, because they squeezed our lemons, bro. they took everything from us. No, but they did. They built their society and their empires and their civilization on the blood, sweat, and tears of Muslim nations around the world. Not just Muslim nations, but anywhere that was outside of Europe and America, right? And they still are till this day, and we're still suffering the consequences of that. So I will take what I can get in that regard, and in there build something back. And that was always the West shooting itself in the foot. And I'll always stick it on a racist who says that to me in the street. I'll get out of my country or whatever. But you wouldn't have a country if it wasn't for my people anyway. Like at the end of the day, you wouldn't have You wouldn't have half the stuff, 90% of the stuff that you live in luxury for, if it wasn't because of the domination of the rest of the world and the subjugation of the rest of the world and the colonization of the rest of the world and the stuff that was taken, the resources that were taken. So by force, not by trade, not by fair trade, but by force in a lot of cases.
That's what some people are saying recently. Like, Europe has always been just a place of war between little kingdoms. And it's only been about, it's been, I guess, 70 years, 65 years since World War II. And maybe it's, going to go back to the norm, because that was the norm. And maybe,
of course.
Like they were mentioning this Ukraine thing, it's the first war since World War II in Europe, right? And then you have like, I think it was some signs of like Germany potentially thinking of leaving EU or not being able to sustain staying in the EU. And so it just takes something like that to happen as well, to revert back to the norm. Like,
I think it was because I think Sheri is what's his name? Muslim Nation. Brother,
Muslim Nation? I don't know what Muslim Nation is.
Middle Nation.
Oh, yeah, Shahid or Shahid,
Uamun. Shahid, that's it. No, because he put a video up regarding what you just mentioned about Germany, and he essentially, the way he broke it down, if I can recall, is because Germany is so reliant on Russia's gas that now that Germany is being pressured by, obviously, its partners, its NATO and its EU and all that stuff, America, to not buy Russian gas anymore, it would literally collapse. So they've got no choice. So they're considering leaving just so they don't have that on them, just so they can continue buying the gas.
Wow.
Do you understand?
Because it's that much of an existential threat to them.
Yeah, that's essentially a summary of what I can remember him saying. He explained it obviously a lot better than I can. But this is it. It's like when you, it's like a human body, akhi. A human body, a fascinating creation of Allah. If you give it an external sort of source of something that it uses, it shuts down its own bodily process of making that. So look at drugs. Drugs and dopamine. Drugs self, dopamine, and I'm butchering the explanation, but they're essentially giving your body some sort of, a hormone that is a pleasurable hormone that makes you feel good, etc., and your body already produces that itself, right? But you're giving it an external influencer. So what the body does, because it's so great at conserving energy, it shuts down its own production of that certain thing because it thinks it's getting it from an outside source. You take away the outside source, you no longer have it coming from the outside. You're no longer producing it from the inside. Your body goes into chaos and it withdrawal symptoms and it's like killing itself. Well, that's exactly what's going to happen to Europe. All of the resources that it got are from external areas, whether it's Africa mining for, all these sort of minerals or all these diamonds or gold or whatever, right? Or gas from the Middle East or whatever. And it didn't rely on producing things for itself because it didn't have the resources for itself. So it built its entire civilization on external resources, right? And then suddenly you've got this issue where things are getting cut off, where the areas of where these resources exist are getting a bit more autonomy and a bit more self-control and cutting off when they want to. And then suddenly they're left fighting each other in Europe, just like a body would do in withdrawal symptoms, because they don't have that stuff for themselves. And that's it. Like you pulled the rug from under their feet. And it's like what the king of Saudi Arabia once said in relation to oil, where he said where America wanted them to pump out more oil. This was obviously in the past. And they said, well, we can cut off the oil. And he said, well, we'll bomb your country back to the Stone Age. And the king of Saudi Arabia essentially said that, our ancestors lived in the desert and we can go back to living in the desert. Like, we're not giving you this oil. You know what I mean? So it's interesting to see it like that, I suppose. And likewise, the Ummah is one body. And we'd like to think that even the way the situation of the Ummah is now, and if you want to see it in a negative light, feel free. If you want to see it in a positive light, feel free. At the end of the day, when push comes to shove, in every Muslim nation, when there is calamity, what are they shouting in the streets, bro? They're shouting Allahu Akbar in the streets. La ilaha illallah in the streets. One is pointed to the head, and when there's a calamity, like look at Syria before the war, okay? Syria before the war had a reputation, unfortunately, of being very liberal and very Western, very whatever, and not very close to Deen. Unfortunately, I remember this being a stereotype. Well, Allah knows best. But then as soon as the war happened, every single person you'd see being interviewed in Syria or video coming out of Syria, you would find dhikr in their lips. You'd find Allah being mentioned all the time.
Yeah.
I've realized, so with every Muslim nation, if there was ever to be a calamity, we would instantly be unified because in our core is Iman, and that fitrah that we're close to.
Alhamdulillah,
For
yeah.
these, alhamdulillah, and for these other nations, bro, it's not so much the case. It's not so much the case.
Yeah. Even when they try and revert back to their original principles, it's actually not the original principles. It's just a caricature of it,
Yeah.
Like these Matt Walsh and his friends, they want like that 50 years ago America, but without the Christianity, it seems.
Yeah, of course. And even so, even if you were to say Christianity, you guys cannot, like, Christianity, unfortunately, is so far gone in terms of like rules, laws, fundamentals. In fact, it never really existed. The Bible, if you were to break the Bible down in sort of, what it actually is, it isn't the teaching of Jesus. It's just a commentary. I don't want to say closer to hadith, but in that regard, it's just narrations as opposed to any remnant of the word of God, so to speak.
Yeah. I
You
suppose
understand what I mean?
what was known as Christianity for a long time, it's not like what we have in terms of, even we don't have this really, like Quran and Sunnah, and that's it. It was more like the Bible plus social norms,
Yes,
kind
yes,
of.
yes.
And social norms are like, wouldn't change because it was taboo to change and this and that. So
Because it was a religion for a particular people, not for the world.
yeah,
That's another thing about Christianity. Like, only Islam, really and truthfully, is a religion meant for the entire of mankind. But other religions that come before, other messengers that came, they came for specific people. They came for specific areas. And the Prophet ﷺ was a mercy to all of mankind in that regard. And that's a large difference as well. So it's interesting when you break things down this way, what the world stage looks like in reality.
yeah.
And
Countries and borders are funny things, man.
but they thought we will go on.
I was at the Black Sea like a few weeks ago. I was just looking across. I was like, damn, Ukraine is right there.
Oh, subhanallah, yeah. Subhanallah. It's a small world, bro. Really and truthfully. It's a lot smaller than we think. No, obviously, like you said, ultimately the fences are going up. Where do you want to be? And they go up in times of hardship anyway. And yes, they're a political tool to use in any politics. Oh, we've got invaders. We need to. But bro, every sort of modern historical issue has used this trope. I mean, Hitler used it with the Jews and with the sort
Gypsies.
of minority groups. Yes, absolutely. And it happens everywhere. Unfortunately, in Turkey, it's happening with Syrians, and I'm surprised it is, but it is. Unfortunately, you see the viral videos going out. I'm sure there was other countries as well. I know in Morocco, for example, not Spain, Spain, Morocco is a bit of a complicated one, but I'm sure you've seen the videos of all the migrants that are trying to get into Spain through Morocco.
Yeah.
And the atrocities that's happening there. Once again, it's this outside invader, and they're coming and taking our jobs. I mean, look at UKIP and all that stuff that happened in EDL, all that stuff that happened in the UK and stuff. And yes, there has been a multicultural society in the 90s, early 2000s, but they're backtracking on that. They don't want that anymore. Multiculturalism is dead. That's it.
Yeah, man. Actually, one country that is not going that direction, it seems, is UAE at least. They're quite going the other way in terms of, they've done a lot of work in the last few years in terms of visas and making it easier actually for people to come there and live there. Obviously, they have unique circumstances where like less than 20% of the population are actual kind of Emiratis. So they absolutely need foreigners to come for them to exist, like absolutely fundamentally. But they're kind of opening up more a little bit. But maybe you could say, when the oil is less useful to them, then they'll close in. They can't close in, bro. They can't survive without Filipinos and Indians, bro.
It's interesting. A lot of I was on looking at jobs and stuff yesterday on job sites, and a lot of the stuff that they're advertising for, very specifically, like UAE nationals only. I see that more and more. I didn't used to see that like years ago, but now I'm seeing Saudi the same thing, Qatar the same thing. very much pushing for
Yeah,
this
mine as well. Yeah,
nationals only.
nationalization of the thing. It's true. Yeah, it's true. That's true as well.
Mm.
I guess they're opening up in terms of if you've like already got a job and you're bringing it with you, like you've got a
Yeah.
business or you're working remotely, then yes, come over, bring your money. Like that's cool. But yeah, local jobs. Yeah, there has been a push over the years for that stuff. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Dilution of culture, bro. Nobody wants it. Or do they? I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting to see that. UAE and the Gulf in general is just an absolute anomaly to me. I've never really been there long enough or so separated from that kind of culture
It
to
is an
understand what
anomaly,
it's
yeah.
like on the ground.
It's not like
Yeah.
anywhere really that I've seen. I feel like a more normal place when it comes to like different people living together is like Malaysia, maybe, where you've got
Yeah.
the Indians, the Chinese, the Malays, and there isn't one of them that's like a super minority or a super majority, and they're kind of separate. That you can tell, like they look different, they have different languages, but then they're okay together, kind of thing. No doubt there's
Yep.
some tensions and stuff, but maybe that's what a mixed society looks like more traditionally, maybe. Like maybe you could
Yeah,
imagine
possibly.
in Al-Andalus, you would have like the Europeans, the Arabs, the Berbers, I don't know, other people, Jews and stuff. They would be separate, but like they're still kind of cool together, kind of thing.
I suppose if you've got a spiritual connection, so you're all part of the same faith, as well as a national one, so you're all consider yourself Malaysians and you consider yourself part of the identity, then you have less hiccups. I think the issues here, although you'd say the same about Turkey and Syrians, wouldn't you? But the language is a bit different, I suppose, isn't it? And the ethnicity side of things can.
To be
can
honest, bro,
massively
like the
trip
whole
up.
Syria-Turkey thing,
Is it overblown?
if you know Turks or the Turkish culture, you would actually, I think anyway, from what I know, just being here 2 years or whatever, if I knew like what Turks are like or the Turkish culture when it comes to their country, if I knew what it was like, I would be shocked that they allowed 5 million Syrians in.
Right.
Like their culture is more nationalistic than Tunisia, Algeria, like any Arab country, I think, like very nationalistic. So I think, you know, they're hospitable people, they're generous people. And so the idea of like, yeah, okay, there is an element, they're Muslims and they're in urgent need now of help. Like, yeah, I can see how they'll be open to that. But when it became 5 years and 10 years and then going on to 15 years, that's, and then obviously economic pressures and politicians playing with it. Yeah, I think it's a fragile thing, really.
Yeah, I think a lot of these things anyway are spurred by the moment, aren't they? And the people's hearts are soft during the calamity, but then when that pass, I'm not saying it has passed, I'm not, but I'm saying in terms of media and the focus and in public discussion, it's passed, unfortunately, and people haven't kept that alive so much. Then people become less sympathetic and less generous for the space that they need to share. I mean, look what's happening in Ukraine. Give it 10 years. If this war was to end tomorrow, in 10 years' time, bro, they'll be complaining about how many people from Ukraine are here. There would be. That's just the cycle. It's the reality. It's the reality.
Although to a lesser extent, if they more readily not integrate, but assimilate. You know, obviously, if you're from a Christian nation, then you're going to assimilate maybe more readily. Or I mean, Ukraine's almost. It's probably more like an atheist kind of leaning country. So,
but it's a psychology, though. It's a psychology of being away from home that actually probably makes you want to cling on to your culture even stronger. You know, especially if you've left by force.
But don't you find that like, unless you like, culture is something that very quickly will just go away in like one generation, unless you have a very strong reason to hold on to it. I don't know. I just find that when it comes to non-Muslims, when they immigrate, like they very just easily will like let go of it, and they just think it's a very subjective thing. Like, yeah, like now I've been in the UK for 10 years, 20 years. It's like, yeah, Ukrainian culture, British culture, it's all the same. Like, it's just based on where you are at the time. But
Yeah, I
Muslims,
guess so for
that's why
some.
Muslims are more annoying to like host nations because it's like, no, we have an objective reason that we're going to hold on to this thing.
Yeah. There's obviously going to be an ethnic difference as well there, a visible difference as well. Racism embedded in the culture. Um, all these brown people in our country, blah blah blah. I mean, a lot of stuff was built upon racism. A lot of sort of policy, procedure, the way the world works, the way the maps were drawn out is on race, and you could go on forever studying that and talking about that. Um, which only speaks to the nature of this world, really, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
how Shaitan wasn't a huge fan of Adam alayhi for similar reasons. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a sin that will continue to be propagated, and may Allah protect us from
Did
falling
you hear
into it.
that interview you sent in the Telegram group with the Tunisian and Algerian? Yeah, that guy is like, what did he say? Battle match with late sorry. He's like direct with late sorry. He was laughing about it.
Yeah, man. But it's interesting, like stuff like that as well, and how vastly different, at least in perspective, such a neighboring country could be. Tunisia and Algeria. But despite the fact that, like, what is the cause of that difference? Why would Algeria be stronger than Tunisia,
Well, that
at
was
least
a big
perceptually?
reason is tourism. That's clear
I was
reason.
going to say, maybe because of the war of independence was a bit fiercer. A
No,
bit
yeah,
fiercer, a
that's
lot
another
fiercer.
element.
But
But
yeah,
I'm just saying, like, very obviously, yeah. The
tourism.
reason one of the reason Algeria is more conservative than Morocco or Tunisia in general, yani, is because we don't have tourists. Like, we don't have foreigners coming in. We don't have, also when you open up to tourists, it's not just that there are physical bodies coming in. It's like media starts to, exchange more.
Yeah.
Money changes hands like between this outer world and the inner world. So I think that plays
So
like that's an obvious one, Yani. But then
it's like
also
what I said earlier.
we've got the culture of like literally war, and we
Yeah.
fought them off, like we kicked them out and this and that.
It reminds me of what I said earlier about the whole resource thing and relying on resources. But in reverse, there's a lot of Muslim countries that rely on the tourism of the West, and if they were to shut that off, they would also be going through a spasm and withdrawal symptoms, so to speak.
Sure.
So it'd be interesting to see. Like, I don't know what Tunisia it really is without tourism, because it's
Just
just
part of Algeria, bro. Come on.
just please just take us.
It's like the Scotland of the UK.
But it shows you, bro, these countries, these societies, these areas
Yeah.
weren't meant to be a vacuum, bordered
Sure.
vacuums that are on
Yes.
their own.
That just makes them
And Maghreb
weaker,
was a
yeah, on their
region.
own. Yeah.
Yeah, it just made them weaker. It was a divide and conquer thing.
Yeah.
It was divide Tunisia to an extent where it's only real, like if you look at those maps where it says what's the number one resource that gets exported, like Tunisia is, I think, textiles. And it's like, well, flipping, get textiles from anywhere. But you know what I mean? Like textiles isn't unique.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, this is the one thing we've got. Other than that, it's dates and harissa. Okay.
Half the dates are
What
from
else you got?
Algeria originally.
Yeah, well, one could argue the opposite as well. One could say that all the dates from Tunisia.
No. What I just mean is a lot of the dates that are from Tunisia on the packaging, they were just packaged in Tunisia, but they've grown in Algeria.
Oh, really?
That's on them. Yeah.
Either way, subhanAllah, what a mess. Why can't we just be? I've
This
tried
is
to
life,
unite the
bro.
North African region, bro. I tried to unite it with my family. I've got the Moroccan side, Tunisian side, Algerian side. I tried to,
Yeah,
whenever I
you're doing
tell
it,
any
bro.
North Africans about it, bro, they love it. They love it.
It's good.
Yeah, man.
It's
But
good.
unfortunately, there's no real way of unifying each other. I don't know how they do that. Has that ever happened in the modern day and age of like countries just saying, "Ah, you know what? Screw it. Let's just become one." I feel like there is,
Yeah.
but I can't
Only the
think off the top
opposite,
of my
like
head.
Sudan
Yeah.
split.
Yeah. Korea split.
Crimea became part of Russia. There you go.
By force.
Yeah.
But Algeria just needs to take over Tunisia, like hostile surprise.
Yeah, man.
I wouldn't fight it, bro. I wouldn't fight it. I'd be like, please,
I'm trying to
liberate
think,
us
like,
from this
would you
tourism.
prefer your government or our government? Probably
I don't know
equal.
anything. I don't know anything about your government.
The main thing
But
you would have if we took over is the gas money in it. So that would be
that's what
good.
we need, bro.
Yeah.
Give me some of that gas money. I give you textiles.
Yeah.
I give you the drip.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
That'd be
Morocco's
nice.
much better off than Tunisia, right?
They're still very much. I mean, they've got their own. I'm sure they've got their own exports and stuff. Their culture is a lot stronger. I feel
Yes.
they export their culture a lot
Yeah.
stronger.
Actually, Moroccan culture in terms of okay how it's known worldwide, but also how they've preserved their culture, their whether it's clothing
Yeah.
or pottery or these things, is stronger than Algeria and Tunisia, definitely.
Yeah, I consider that as well. I think Tunisia is the least. Algeria comes next, and Morocco is probably the best of the bunch in that regard.
And maybe part of the reason
But
actually for that is tourism as well. It's like that's a selling point.
well, you make two decisions, don't you? It's like a business. You got business, and you're selling. I don't know. You're selling a product in that business, and do you sell the one that is the same as everybody else's, or do you sell the one that's unique to you? You know,
Yeah.
and actually, when you sell the one that's just like everyone else, because a lot of people have approached me through my many years and said, "Oh, I'm thinking of going to Tunisia." Like, English people, like, "Oh, I'm thinking of traveling to Tunisia. What would you think?" And I'm like, "Well, we got beaches. There's better beaches, and we got hotel resorts, but there's better hotel resorts. So I don't really know why you're going." Like, honestly, I've said that to people. Honestly, said that because honestly, I couldn't see the difference. Like, if I had to pick, would I like to go to a beach in, like, I don't know, Hawaii, or would I like to go to a beach in Tunisia? Like, I don't. There's beaches everywhere, all around the world, and that's all we've got. That really separates us from anyone else, or not separates us, but makes it a destination. Because at least with Morocco, you've got very strong sort of culture. It's like an experience, bro. You're going to a completely different experience. You're not going into this place that's trying to be just like every other place
Copy
that has a
paste, yeah.
beach. Yeah, that's the way I see it. I could be wrong, but that's my perspective of how I've experienced it. It's
I
like,
thought
we got
Morocco has
beaches.
like a bit of both. It has like the whole package hotel resort thing, if you
No,
want
it's got
that.
all of that.
And then it's also
It's
got
got all
the
of that.
yeah.
But I'm talking about what's unique that you won't find
Yeah.
elsewhere, and the uniqueness is that culture that really is unlike. There's bits of that in Algeria, and there's bits of that in Tunisia, no doubt. Obviously, the North African, like if you go to Sidi Bou Said in Tunisia, very much heavy on the culture, but is it as widespread? No, it's not. But you can go to any, you could pretty much go to any town in Morocco, as far as I'm aware, and you will find that culture across the board. You will find that art, that decor, that aesthetic across the board.
Yeah.
That is unique to it. Whilst in Tunisia, Algeria's got that as well. Although Algeria's got, what I do like about Algeria, I say like, what was interesting is you've still got all of those old like those old French buildings from the colonial era, but they have been. It's like
They've been
Algerians
graffitied
taken.
over.
Yeah, but some of them have. Some of them are. Algeria's taken ownership of it, and that's like, okay, that's our identity. That's ours.
You mean we use
That's
it? Like
us now.
we use the buildings? Or?
Yeah, like look at the post office that you've got in Algeria. That massive, huge thing in the capital. Which I asked once, thinking it was like some massive government building, but it was a post office. I was like, why is a post office need to be that big? But the Grand Poste. That's what it was. That's all like really, very obviously French and stuff. A lot of Algeria's big architectural marvels are French.
That's
in
true.
that regard. And there isn't been much in the way of. I'm completely butchering it because I haven't really been there enough, have I? But I definitely saw more culture there than I did in Tunisia. But yeah, like when you go for thobes, North African thobes, you go for Moroccan thobes, don't you? You go for Moroccan thobes. Oh, the Moroccan shoes, the Moroccan pottery, the Moroccan mosaic. It's not often that you go, oh, I want that Tunisian thobe or that.
Even though it's the same thing.
It is, but for some reason they've sold their culture a lot better in Morocco.
Yeah.
And when you say same thing, like even you say same thing, but there's a lot of stuff that is actually unique. Like, okay, I can see, like we would know. I think me and you would know a Libyan outfit.
Oh,
and then see a Libyan outfit I would know because they're a bit more unique. Tunisia, I only know because I'm Tunisian. but I don't think I'd be able to tell the difference if I was outside of that.
Yeah. So if you're in the UK and you're not have no link to North Africa, then
you would see
North African culture is Moroccan culture. It's the same
Yeah,
thing.
you would just think that.
Absolutely. But I was talking more from a like internal point of view. Like even then, Algeria's weak because a lot of the, whether it's the tiles or any traditional kind of handiwork stuff, a lot of that is like made in Morocco. Even it's like made in Morocco, imported to Algeria, and then it's sold in Algeria. Whereas we used to make that, but maybe we hardly make it now, or we don't make it at all now.
It's the push. I think I spoke to my dad about this back in the day. This exact discussion. I was trying to understand it, and I think he said to me, it was basically different societies pushed different things and held different things dear. Like I remember when I was at school in Tunisia, we used to do, the etch work that they do on those like gold plates.
Okay.
So you'd get that. We used to have to do that at school. Like that was part of our thing. And maybe during that time there was a push to revive Tunisian culture. We used to make carpets in school. So we used to make little versions, but they'd have, I don't know what they're called, but obviously those things where you put the loom and the thread in and you have to pop it down with these kind of fork things.
Textiles,
do that
bro, there you go.
Textiles, baby. Yeah, so these things are cool. I remember. These are part of the tradition, part of the culture. But it's not something that is really being marketed or selling well. But there's certain countries in the world, actually, that the way they export culture is incredible.
Yes.
Morocco's pretty good. Korea is doing really well. South Korea doing really well at the moment. Japan has done well historically for that kind of stuff. And this is why when bad things happen in those societies, like some calamity, the world is outpouring for them. Like today, for example, did you see the news today? The prime minister, the old
former
prime
prime
minister of Japan, former prime minister got assassinated. That was crazy. Now in my head, I was like, he got assassinated because probably some people had a grievance towards him. Okay, so I'm reading all these articles, expecting to find out why he was hated so much that someone would assassinate him. Didn't see a single one, not a single commentary, not a single anything about anything bad he's ever done. And I'm not saying that because I'm a negative person, but I'm thinking if this guy was bad enough that he would get assassinated like that, what he's not even the prime minister anymore. That's what I'm trying to say. Like someone has held a grudge on him for so long that they want to assassinate him even though he's in power. So what is it that he did? What was his most known blunders or his policies or his oppression or whatever that caused something like that to happen? And I can't find anything because the exporting of their culture is so that everything is so positive. Everything is in a positive light. Do you know what I'm trying to see? Like from a Western perspective, maybe if you were in Japan or maybe you're in a neighboring enemy country or whatever, so to speak, you would see all the negatives. Like if you were in North Korea now, you'd see all the negatives. but because we're in a society that's actually, drunk Kool-Aid, so to speak, of that culture. That's it. That's what I'm trying to say. If you're good at exporting your culture, you can do no wrong in the eyes of the world.
Obviously, America's the best at that. Very good. But even UAE almost has no culture. Okay. But they have created a sort of image of themselves, which is very positive. It's interesting, really.
I feel like they've exported this future metropolis kind of thing.
That stuff. Right?
That's the direction they're heading. I think Saudi is somewhat trying to follow that line. Or pioneer that now.
They're going for that whole like Palace of the Dajjal look kind of thing. Bro, that's culture as well, bro.
It is a culture, bro.
Yeah.
The Dajjal is a man and he's going to have a culture, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Israel as well. Like Israel, like, like with non-Muslims, Israel is associated with like tech startups, military gear, like, innovative basically and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Even though to us it's like, that's like the devil himself.
Yeah, and I think, you know what? It's interesting because internally I have this thing, like, I always feel like Israel is a tent. It's like a tent. It's not a country. It's like something that's just propped up and it's not going to be there for long. But then I failed to realize how long it's actually been there. I bumped into a few people the other day and they were flying to Israel, right? I think they were Israeli. And I was like, Yeah, it's an actual like place with
It has
no, but yeah,
airports. Like,
yeah,
don't they
but
just
you
have
see
a
what I mean? Like,
strip on the land where you can
but
land?
the Muslim experience is because we're so so deeply involved and aware of the history, we feel like it's only just happened.
Yeah.
Like we are so deeply engaged with the history of Palestine that we just feel like this whole thing that happened, the Nakba, the takeover, whatever you want to call it, the occupation, it's only yesterday, and we could like we're fighting against it still. But for the rest, for a lot of the world, bro, unfortunately, Palestine doesn't exist, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, um, Israel is just a
Yeah.
fact of life
Exactly. Yeah.
for many. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So that's what you have to contend with in a way.
And that probably
I'm
also
not saying
explains
that it is,
why,
but
like, with the whole Rohingya thing, there probably wasn't much support for them, whether from politicians or monetarily from charities, maybe, because no one knows who they are. No one heard of them.
yeah,
It's only because
yeah.
they're Muslim that we were like first heard of them, and second, like, actually paid a little attention.
Yeah, of course. And actually, when you try and see all these documentaries about cultures, minority cultures, or minority societies that are trying to gain sympathy, the first thing they do is try and promote their culture. So they'll say, like, imagine you see a documentary of, I don't know, I'm sure you've seen them, like a small society of Native Americans in America. Their water supply has been mashed up, and we're trying to get sympathy for them.
Typical vibes.
The first thing that documentary will show is like trying to humanize them and showing a bit of their culture and
Yeah,
what they
yeah,
might do different.
yeah.
Oh, look, this is a ceremony they do for
Rituals,
this. And
yeah.
there's this. Oh, yeah, exactly. Because they're trying to export that culture. Look, oh, look, look at this beautiful thing that they do. Oh, look how they consider the Mother Nature. All this, like, it's that humanization. So it's interesting. The culture war there and the exploitation of
Marketing,
culture.
bro.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, exactly. Marketing 101. You're
Geo-marketing.
marketing to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
This has been a
Damn.
different episode. I feel
We're
like
like-
we didn't spend
we're
more
like
than
political
10 minutes
commentators,
on
bro.
one topic.
No, bro. We're talking geopolitics now. I need to wear a suit next time.
Yellow eye.
It's good, bro. It's good. Yellow. Kids are screaming,
Yes.
banging on doors.
It's nearly
you know.
nominative.
My mind is heisted, bro.
Great. I have no idea what I'm going to call this episode because I feel like there wasn't a clear topic. But
It's
hey.
okay.
Okay, this was Mind Heist episode 167. Go to mindheistpodcast.com to contact us. It's not working right now, but it should in the future soon, inshallah. And yeah, subhanak Allahumma bihamdik, shadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Hey, come inside.